Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Kicking It Classic with JCD. I am your host, John JCD DiMaselli. As always, Kicking It Classic with JCD is part of the PWP Nation Network. You can check out PWP Nation on Twitter at PWP Nation. You can check out the show on Twitter at KITCWJCD. You can check me out on Twitter, John DSINY1219. You can follow the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Kicking It Classic with JCD. And you can email the show, kickingitclassicwithjcd@yahoo.com. This episode is going to focus on some of the backstage changes of one of my favorite shows of all time, not just because it's an awesome show, but because I was at this show and, man, this was just a fun day all around. Of course, I am talking about SummerSlam 2002. So the event was held August 25th, 2002 at the Nassau Coliseum for a legitimate sellout of 14,797. And the reason why I say legitimate sellout is because not only was I there, but I worked at a place where they had a Ticketmaster in our store. And after 3 hours, you could not get a ticket. It was a legit sellout. It was a full sellout. It wasn't one of these, well, we only selected 50% of the building to be used, so we'll sell that out. Yay, we sold out, or anything like that. This was back when you did a sellout, you did a legit sellout. The show is known for the return of Shawn Michaels to the ring, as well as The Rock and Brock Lesnar for the WWF title, WWE Undisputed title at the time. I got to get my dates correct here. And it is also known in myth and old stories as the night we turned on The Rock. And again, as somebody who was there, this started in the parking lot. Rocky sucks, die Rocky die, fuck The Rock, let's go Lesnar, and it carried all night, and it carried into the main event to the point where you could see when that match is going on, Rock is jawing with the crowd. Rock knew he lost the crowd, and he does a bullshit interview on WWE.com that goes up around midnight, saying, oh, we knew that was going to happen, we were prepared for it, which was bullshit. And I will post it on our Twitter and our Facebook. There's actually footage of The Rock post SummerSlam getting fed up with the fans and storming off, and, you know, it probably led to his Hollywood Rock persona coming to life. But that's not what this episode is about. This episode is going to be about, while the show from top to bottom, opener to main event and everything in between, besides being one of the greatest shows of all time, it is also probably the most complete show ever. There's not a clunker on this show. Many companies have tried since. Try as you might. No one before, and I stand my ground even to this day, nobody after has put on a top to bottom complete, amazing 10 out of 10 show like this show was. I don't care what awards you follow, what self-proclaimed know-it-all, wannabe cool uncle and his little douchebag fucking associate you want to listen to or read. I don't care what they tell you. Nothing touches this show. I will fight you on that. The show is great, and it not because some never will be wannabe younger uncle douchebag who was shown that there's a portion of the business that doesn't need your ass, said it was great. It was great because it was great. And that's what SummerSlam 2002 is. But again, that's not what I'm here to talk about. And that's why that show will continue to be the standard bearer for shows for the rest of your life, Mark Man. So, with that said, like I said, the show is known for those matches, but that was not originally what this show was supposed to be centered around. There was actually 3 versions of what the big matches for this show would be before we actually got to the greatest 10-star show ever. And that's what we're going to go over in this episode. 2 of the biggest stars that WWE had going into and coming out of WrestleMania was Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And what makes this show, again, so great is you had neither one of those stars for similar yet different reasons, which we're going to get into, end up not on the show. And you still pulled the greatest show of all time out of your hat is a testament. It's unfortunate that some midlife crisis douchebag or some cat fucker with a bad beard and a dirty hat wouldn't recognize that if it slapped them in the face. But again, I digress. The reason why, first off, that the losses of Hogan and Austin for the show were massive, because if you go to the original, I'm talking January 2002 plans for the NWO to return, Hulk Hogan versus Steve Austin was the original talked about plan, not so much for WrestleMania, despite what, excuse me, no COVID, a lot of people will want you to think, but it was more that Austin Hogan was probably going to be the end game at SummerSlam. The original plan for Hogan's return was, before they got into Mania weekend, because I know everyone talks about it, including Hogan in his book, how, when they got to Toronto, everything that they thought they were going to do was completely thrown off the table, and it was like, all right, let's reinvent this thing. The original idea was Hogan would beat Rock at Mania. He would beat Triple H for the title, and then he would kind of do exactly what he was doing, just with different results. He would have beaten Undertaker at Judgment Day, defeated Kurt Angle at King of the Ring. There was talk, if everything had stayed the way it was, there would be some sort of tag match at the July pay-per-view, and then Austin would face Hogan at SummerSlam for the title. Obviously, with everything that happened at WrestleMania, that doesn't happen. Between Rock beating Hogan and just the amazing response that Hogan got, Hogan goes face, kind of takes Rock's spot as like the pseudo top face on SmackDown. And it was like, okay, you know what? Hogan Austin, maybe that's off the table for now. Well, lo and behold, before we knew what was going through Austin's head, they started an angle with Ric Flair and Steve Austin. And, okay, you could kind of see the writing on the wall. Okay, Flair Austin at SummerSlam. On the flip side of SmackDown, Hulk Hogan was kind of loosely getting involved with Vince McMahon, even though McMahon had stepped away and made Stephanie the GM. There was some loose, maybe we get Hogan McMahon at SummerSlam. Hogan was teaming with Edge. They were tag champs. They had lost the titles to the Un-Americans. There was also talk of maybe Hogan Jericho at SummerSlam, which would have been a awesome attraction. But again, there's a lot of different pieces at play. So now, so we're not going to get Hulk Hogan versus Steve Austin. But okay, if we get Steve Austin versus Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan versus Chris Jericho, we don't need The Rock to come back early. Okay, Undertaker can defend the title against Brock Lesnar and pass the torch to Lesnar at SummerSlam. No problem. The rest of the card would have pretty much stayed the way it was. The only one who might have been out of the loop would have probably been Test, but you would think the fact that Kane came back the night after on Raw, maybe Test gets involved, and they could have done a Kane spot at SummerSlam. If you're cleared for Monday, you're cleared for Sunday. So the card wouldn't have terribly changed that much. But then we get the Austin walkout, which now, okay, Austin walks out in the company. Ric Flair is pretty much turned face immediately and enters into a feud with Chris Jericho. Okay, what about Hogan? There's still a gap where what Hogan would do at SummerSlam. Now the problem becomes, after him and Edge dropped the tag titles to the Un-Americans, and then the Un-Americans jumped to Raw, Hogan was really left in limbo for SummerSlam. But alas, Hogan all of a sudden has an issue with his contract, okay? And now him and Vince are at odds. So they smartly, to get Lesnar heat for his title match against Rock. Rock had come back to bail out the company when Austin had left and won the title in July. So now, what was Hulk Hogan going to do? Well, they have Brock Lesnar destroy Hulk Hogan leading into SummerSlam on SmackDown. That's the match with Lesnar with the bear hug, and Hogan passes out, and that's it. That's it. Him and Vince got into it like they have, and couldn't agree on anything, and Hogan was gone from the company. So you had Hogan gone. You had Austin gone. Okay, we all know the rest. Undertaker faces Test in a match that is a lot better than it had any right being, considering who was in it. You get Ric Flair facing Chris Jericho, which ended up being a really good feud for the SummerSlam part of it. The Unforgiven side of it, when they faced in September, was a little And you got The Rock facing Brock Lesnar. And it's amazing to think how that ended up being the best of the best. That show was just, I can't picture that show as cool as Austin Hogan would have been, or even Austin Flair and maybe Hogan Jericho. I just can't picture that show. And Undertaker Brock, there was also talk, actually I'm skipping a step here, of maybe doing Hogan Rock 2 at SummerSlam. That was brought up early if they could get Rock back. That never materialized into anything. I want to tend to think that had to do with the fact that Austin had left, so you couldn't do Hogan Rock at Mania. And then the other part of it is, well, would we have gotten Shawn Michaels Triple H? The answer is absolutely. Because, again, when you look back at what was going on with that, Shawn was in the NWO, and they were trying to recruit Hunter. Now, the idea was maybe Hunter faces Kevin Nash in July, and then would face a returning Michaels at SummerSlam. The plan was always to get Michaels back in the ring for SummerSlam with Hunter. So that was never really affected by anything to do with Hogan Austin, just maybe the way it was presented and where it was placed. And the fact that Shawn had to come back ended up being the face instead of the heel due to the Kevin Nash injury and the NWO pretty much disbanding right then and there. That match was always on the docket. It was just a matter of how it was going to be presented. So that, a lot of people don't think that. A lot of people think Shawn Hunter was reactionary to everything else going on. No. That was always on the card. It was just Shawn was probably going to be the heel, Hunter was going to be the face, and it was probably just going to be a one-off for Shawn. So, but again, it's amazing how this show came together, and I stand my ground. It is without a doubt the greatest top-to-bottom show of all time. You come at me with another show, you could take that show and you could shove it up your ass, because it ain't going to fly here. So, thank you for listening. Again, I am John JCD DiMaselli. The last show of this season, which will probably drop in a couple of days, is going to focus on, ironically enough, the departure of Stone Cold Steve Austin in 2002. I am your host, John JCD DiMaselli. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll check you out next episode.